like you and you don't like me. And neither of us like each other, but the fact of the matter is we've got to do this stupid stream lest we, I don't know, make something more productive of our lives, and that would be the true tragedy. So, well, that's that didn't work, but okay, let's just go back onto here. And here we go. I will just let everyone know that I am live. Yeah, boy, brackets, me is live. Right. So I think that we can just... Oh, excuse me. I think we can just jump in. Let's go.
Sure. Whatever. They might have complex backgrounds, but I don't really care. Using trauma as an argument for why these children might not be trans is, I think, kind of disgusting. And my arguments against it would be the same as for autism. So what? If you still want an answer, a quick one, gender dysphoria is not caused by trauma. Asterisk. Gender itself might be caused by trauma.
Hey, zombie pup. How's it going? Yes. I think really at this point it's just a question of how much can I progress the fate of York City FC before we finish the debunking video. In a way, like 4 hours and blah blah blah. It seems like a really long time, but in my head I imagine this like taking a month of responding. And you kind of realize actually if you're reacting to something in like hour-long sessions, even 4 hours, you'll do it pretty quickly.
Oh, climbing the mountain is an allegory for gender. Anyways, that's a discussion for another time and for people smarter than me. But if you want to know more, you should probably read Gender Without Identity.
I think we should just sim the match. I mean, I don't really want to sim a match. It feels cheating. No, I'm not going to sim a match. You can't make me.
So instead I want to look at what happens when you don't believe that trans people exist. And this is the narrative that binds these people together. That men are men and women are women. So simple. Okay, but what does it...
Okay, so to clarify a point, men certainly are objectively men and women certainly are objectively women. I mean, there's no ambiguity there, obviously. Then the question becomes, how do you define men and how do you define women? Indeed, I suppose actually in many ways, we are not the ones who would say men are men and women are women. We would make a point of saying that men are biological males and women are biological females, because to say men are men and women are women, that's kind of circular, and that's what these people are saying. On Twitch it still says you are playing Oblivion. Yes, maybe somebody doesn't know how to do anything on Twitch. I'm not saying... Anyway, look, have you noticed how I'm actually supporting the team? The Reds. Yeah, that's something I should probably fix, especially because I am now playing a consistent game, but I don't know. It's just so annoying. To be honest, I'm not on top of anything in my life right now. Like, there is nothing that's going the way it should be, so... Like, I'm pretty much just stumbling from one moment to the next, and as such, I do not have the wherewithal to actually get all my ducks in a row. It doesn't really matter, thank you, that's actually very important to me.
Actually entail that men are men and women are women. How can you then explain trans people? And the answer to this is much more complex than just accepting.
Okay, whatever. I don't know. Like, that's obviously a really dumb thing to say. Like, how can you explain trans people if men are men and women? Oh, by the way, let me know if there's a serious discrepancy in the volume. Just because, you know, that's important. Yeah, obviously, like, we all know that's not actually... It's not really coherent to say that this is an inconsistency.
That trans people exist. To do this, I think we need a very short explanation of where trans comes from. In the Western world, the trans condition can seem like a very new thing. What's called transgender today was, until pretty recently, known as transsexual. And the word transsexual was only introduced to the English language in the early 1950s. transsexual was made as a distinction to transvestite. It became apparent to Harry Benjamin in the 1950s, one of the people who coined the term transsexual, the transsexual phenomenon, how some of these men didn't just dress as women, no, they felt like women. They were in all but physical appearance, and sometimes also even in physical appearance, women. What defined them as men was not themselves, but their surroundings. This is in contrast to transvestite, which Benjamin described as being primarily interested in the aesthetics of the opposite sex, but not actually belonging to the opposite sex. The term transvestite was
obviously, I just want to say, you can like define these terms, and yeah, absolutely there is a difference. And like it's worth noting that actually the fact that there is a sort of sociological reality to all of this trans stuff, and that is worth recognizing, is really an argument for the gender critical position, because I think we have a better understanding. As far as I should give this goalie some time playing. We have a better understanding of how these categorizations can be formed. Like we can recognize that there is a difference between a transvestite, a cross-dresser, a whatever else, like autogynephile, like all of these terms, they have distinct meanings, and even if some of them just describe basically things that we think are complete nonsense, they still do have meanings. So yeah, I just want to stress that even when you're like pointing out all of these distinctions, yeah, this actually bolsters the gender critical recognition that these sociological realities exist, but they are not equivalent to being a woman. Like biological males can have all sorts of different relationships to gender expression and all sorts of stuff going on in that regard, but none of that makes them women. I feel like I should turn on the main light. Do I want to? No, I don't actually. Okay.
Only coined in 1910 by Magnus Hirschfeld, one of the first and also most important sexologists. He dedicated a whole book to cross-dressing. Die Transvestiten, eine Untersuchung über den
We're gonna get to the incident. The burning.
Erotischen Verkleidungstrieb. In English, that's transvesticism, the act of erotic cross-dressing. Maybe the distinction between transvestite and transsexual was also made simply because operations became a possibility. Some of the people from Hirschfeld's book were only labeled transvestites, I think, because transsexual or third gender or whatever wasn't part of the vocabulary.
They know all too well that a profound contradiction exists between their bodies and their souls. Therefore, one can understand all too well that most of them wish they'd been born female.
It's not like this hadn't ever been documented before, even by earlier sexologists. I haven't seen anyone mention this, but since I took the time to read through several 100-year-old books on sexology, you are gonna hear it now. German Richard von Kraft-Ebing.
I think like the issue with all of this is you're kind of admitting, because usually we would say, oh yeah, what a bunch of Victorians, well they weren't Victorians, but whatever, people from the olden days thought about sex is generally not something you'd want to take to the bank as totally credible, what you should 100% be committed to believing as authoritative, because obviously not. And especially when you talk about like what these people would have thought about women, and if these people thought that the men they were talking about were in some sense women, well, that's no good. So yeah, basically, the fact that you're like making a point of even bringing up that so much of this comes from these crazy German sexologists is kind of going against your point. Oh, this is so in. Okay.
Psychopathia Sexualis from 1886 also describes a couple of people who would now go under the term transgender. He just calls it transmutatio sexus. The English sexologist Havelock Ellis used some other cool terms.
Hello Mojo Jojo Joju lol.
Sexo-aesthetic inversion, or eonism, in Studies in the Psychology of Sex, Volume 2 from 1915. Trans people have always existed. Anyways.
Okay, no, you haven't shown, just because you've shown that people have described something like trans people does not mean you've shown that they always existed. Like the amount of like near shots I've had just then is ridiculous. And again, like the obvious analogy here would be to religion. Like, just because there have always been religions does not mean that God has always existed. That was filthy. Oh my goodness. That was a long time coming. I mean, this must be a really bad team, because I'm playing with my second squad. Oh, let's watch that again. Okay, go away. Close the show again. Okay, look at this. How do I hide this now again? Outside the box, just across the face of the goal. Oh, it's so naughty. Through all those, it's like low. Like, that's the thing. You got to keep it low, because if you keep, you got to have the power, but you got to keep it low so that the keeper can't like get down to it. It's just so good. Anyway, yeah, like that's, I think, the best analogy you can make. Showing that loads of people have been talking about God or the supernatural or anything like that, that doesn't prove that God or the supernatural have existed. In the exact same sense, showing that loads of people have theorized all these ideas about trans people existing, that doesn't prove they've always existed. Now, if you wanted to say that, there have always been people who think that, well, even then you haven't really got the argument, because actually there weren't, like, all of this kind of scientific theorization didn't, so-called scientific, didn't exist until, like, the time you're describing. Like, you're basically describing a very specific time in history and saying, look, they always existed. Yeah, obviously that doesn't make any sense. There is, like, that story of the Roman emperor who really wanted to be called a woman. And that's the thing, like, I could imagine that, because, I mean, like, my explanation for kind of so-called gender dysphoria would be that lots of people are aware of these kind of expectations of masculinity and femininity. Lots of people feel unable to live up to them and in some way constrained by them. And as such, a lot of people then say, well, if these are the expectations of being a man or woman, clearly that just means I must not be a man or woman. And I mean, obviously you can then just apply that to sexuality, right? I mean, it makes sense that in a society that has certain ideas of how men and women should live. And, I mean, obviously we're talking about the European sexologists, but it is worth noting that, there are non-European cultures that have had these sort of spiritual, entirely unapologetically non-scientific conceptions of trans identity. And basically in that context, a lot of that is about sexuality. Like in Africa, there's a lot of stuff about like, oh, if you are the submissive male in a homosexual relationship, that means you're actually not a man. So don't worry, everyone. The guy who's on top, he's not gay. As long as you're wearing the trousers in the sexual relationship, you're not gay. So yeah, basically, like all of that does exist, and all of that has probably existed for a long time. So that was fun. Own goal. Okay, whatever. This is just, there's too much going on. Anyway, basically, that's the thing. It probably is true that there's always been something like this, but the issue is, trans ideology is this theorized thing, this ideologically, I should say, trans identity is this ideologically constructed thing, and therefore it's only existed for as long as the ideologies existed. And the ideologies only existed for little more than a century. And if we're recognizing that trans identity now can mean something that has very little to do with anything material and is just about, kind of a feeling and all of this, sort of Judith Butler stuff, well, you can see where I'm going with that. It's only really existed for like 40 years. And that's not, so basically less than half a century. So yeah, I think we can be quite comfortable in saying that this whole trans identity thing, it's not always existed.
What's important is the very framing we can observe in the history of sexology. In essence, the history of sexology is about the dividing the abnormal from the normal, the natural from the unnatural, the perverse from the pure. In Heinrich Kahn's Psychopathia Sexualis from 1844, noted as the very first academic book on sexology, we can see this illustrated perfectly. On one side there's coitus, and on the other side is everything else. Things that are still seen as heinous today, and for good reason. Bestiality, necrophilia, pederasty, but also more normal things such as onanism and frotting and scissoring, which Kahn labels lesbian love. And all things perverse, carnal.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm just gonna out myself as someone who's, still pure. I don't know what frotting is, but I'm pretty sure it's like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure frotting is weird, isn't it? Like, isn't that like actually kind of gross? I just don't know what it is. I'm pretty sure like whatever. I'm in my head. I'm like, I feel like I've heard that before, and I have heard what it is before, and I'd be like, oh, that sounds dodgy.
Cause couples to inferior races, the opposite of the pure white breed. Khan was a super racist. I'd love to tell you that research has evolved beyond good and evil, but then I wouldn't be talking about it now, would I?
It's a fascinating part
Okay,
of your
just for the
talk.
record, you are allowed to talk about the, the past. Like, it doesn't have to be the case that it still is as it always was for you to be recognizing how it used to be. But yeah, I'm not sure. Let's hear what the argument here is about. The research has evolved beyond good and evil. Oh, hello.
You talk about a condition called, I think it's pronounced autogenephilia,
Autogynephilia.
gynephilia.
I mean, the best estimate of the number of men who are erotic cross-dressers is about 3%.
Really?
So some share of those men, it's not just about the clothes for them, it's about the whole idea of being a woman. That's what's erotic. They imagine being a woman when they're making love. They imagine being a woman, turns them on to just do anything that is coded female.
Autogynephilia.
Okay, so just to clarify, he was like, oh, I'd like to tell you that this is not like we've moved on from talking about good and evil. And then he provides this example where Helen Joyce, to be fair, didn't say that what she's describing is evil. She just identified it as a thing. So that doesn't even, like, it doesn't actually show what he's saying. And the problem is that, again, so he's reading into this that Helen Joyce thinks this is an intrinsically evil thing. By the way, I don't even imagine Helen Joyce would necessarily say that autogynephilia in itself is morally problematic. I think what she would probably say is that, and she might not even say this much, but she would obviously say, well, like, trans people, trans-identified males, living out their trans identity is a problem for all sort of sociological, like reasons as it relates to women's rights. And she also might say that that's especially true because they're living out a fetish. And like that's basically, it's morally wrong to make other people around you unwilling participants in your autoerotic fetish. That's something she might say. She might not even say that, though. She could, like, again, it is possible that actually her entire objection, morally speaking, to trans identity is the fact that you're taking away women's spaces. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing that because it turns you on or just because you're, like some kind of queer theory, postmodernist, whatever. So that's a possibility. And therefore, it doesn't even seem like she is actually necessarily making a moral criticism of autogynephilia. But then there's also the fact that even if she was saying that, just because someone has a moral judgment about a particular, let's say, sexual proclivity, that doesn't prove that the entire theorization of that thing is totally about moral good versus moral evil. So yeah, none of this really makes any sense. But again, I don't even know whether or not... I kind of would imagine that Helen Joyce would be... Because she seems, broadly speaking, to be a liberal. Even though this guy has previously tried to characterize her as a card-carrying Nazi, pretty much. But no, in reality, she's broadly a liberal. I imagine she kind of would have the opinion of, well, if a man wants to be turned on by imagining himself as a woman, that's his prerogative, whatever. But just don't... One, maybe don't do it around other people. Two, definitely don't take away women's rights to single-sex spaces based on that. But to be honest, don't do that anyway, so yeah.
Is how some people explain away what they can see with their own eyes. That trans people exist, and with that, trans joy exists.
Okay, again, it's not... Okay, so he's gonna... But I was just gonna say, we don't need an explanation for trans people existing. Again, atheists don't need... Well, you could maybe say they need a mild explanation, but people who disagree with an idea don't really need an explanation for why people disagree with them. Yeah, they'll maybe have like some concept of like why it is that people come up with these ideas. For the record, I think we can talk about why it is people came up with these ideas. I kind of have already presented that just in this video so far. Let me have a little drink break. But yeah, the idea that like we've arrived at autogynephilia because we're desperately scrounging. What's the phrase? Like scrabbling? I can't think what it is. But we're desperately trying to find some sort of explanation. That's really not the case. And as for the whole, oh well, you know, trans joy exists and this is very confusing for them, which I guess is what he's about to say. Again, we don't really need an explanation for why people feel happy when their delusions are being accommodated. But when you're talking about mental health, happiness can be a dangerous thing. You know, they say that depressed people actually feel like they can sometimes give indications of feeling happier when they're about to take their own lives because they feel like that's the solution to their problems. So actually, we don't really need an explanation for why so-called trans joy exists in order to be critical of many aspects of how trans ideology is conceived of by those who believe in it. Because actually, even if they do have this sense of joy, that could be part of their malformed conception of things and dangerous. And oh goodness me, that was such a bad foul, but I didn't get a red, so good.
Exists as well. But they see trans not as a natural, neutral state of being, but regresses it back in history as a continuation of transvesticism, just taken to the nth degree. They skew Harry Benjamin's argument and erases trans.
Again, there's as with a lot of things, they are kind of different in terms of substance, but yes, also in a sense only different in terms of degree. Like, it is true that someone could be more or less of a crossdresser, if you like, and that doesn't necessarily then cause them to become trans. It isn't just like, you know, you've got someone who cross-dresses a little, and then if they cross-dress loads, they become trans. And it is because, of course, the thing with like transgender identity is that it may well have literally nothing to do with cross-dressing, which is, say, transvestitism. But and that's kind of one of the almost criticisms, especially like intellectually, because people will say, well, at least being a transvestite and a crossdresser, at least that is a material thing. At least that has genuine sociological implications compared to trans identity, which is just totally made up. So in that sense, they're not really like, it's not as if one is just a more extreme version of the other, because actually being transgender can sometimes be less extreme than being a transvestite in terms of its actual material implications and the amount it demands of the person who has that identity.
Transsexuals or transgenders. Instead, autogynephiles are men who get off on not just dressing as women, but actually being women. Autogynephiles, they argue...
Sorry, I like how the clip he showed presented someone not accurately pronouncing autogynephile and then included Helen Joyce correcting him on the pronunciation of autogynephile, and he has then proceeded to mispronounce it, to be fair, not as incorrectly as the other guy said. I think autogynephile. They're really into genies. They really want those 3 wishes. But he's still saying autogynephile, which is not... Yeah, I don't know. It's just a bit weird to literally include the pronunciation being corrected. And maybe this is like a funny joke. I don't know. Like German sense of humor, as they say.
Men, deviant perverts who like being women and who like dating women. Ooh. Now, there are a couple of problems with this idea. First of all, there's absolutely no scientific basis to it. Cisgender women get often...
Okay, yeah. So again, I will say I'm kind of right that what I initially said when I went into this video was that this is just going to be him making a lot of the classic arguments we've all heard many times before, and so far this does seem to be the case. And here, of course, he's kind of, you know, making the standard argument against autogynephilia of like, oh, well, there's no evidence for it. And I can just make the standard response I always make, which is, again, I mean, I wouldn't exactly advise this, but go on to like 4chan, or even like nowadays, I feel like Reddit's actually got almost more perverted, mostly because it's become, like, Reddit used to just be a bunch of like straight white male dudes, and you know, we're all perverts, as straight white males, but in a way where it doesn't really feel perverted because our perversion is just so normalized. It's kind of just like, yep, that's just like sexuality at this point. So, you know, like it was all kind of, you know, whatever, lots of porn, but kind of normal porn. Whereas now I feel like Reddit has become more left-wing and as such more, as you say, queer. But yeah, with that said, you can go onto Reddit. Again, I wouldn't advise it. But the point is that you will see just lots of, I mean, not like in me, I'm not going to pretend like this is just on the front page or something, but there is this evident phenomenon that you'll see if you spend any time looking at kind of trans spaces of these people who sexualize being trans. Like, it's just a really common thing. And what I've always pointed out is that it would be really bizarre. Thank you, Hannah. It would be really bizarre to suggest that there exists this group of men who are clearly turned on by the idea of being women, and there exists this group of men who claim that they are women, and that these two groups of men have nothing to do with each other. Never mind the fact that sometimes we just know they have something to do with each other because they're unambiguously hanging out in trans spaces. But yeah, even just like the problem is you'd have to be, if you're going to say, oh no, this isn't a trans issue, you'd have to be claiming that these dudes exist. But yeah, they've just got nothing to do with the trans issue, and that just seems bizarre.
Themselves just as much as trans women do. To they strictly value the pure.
Okay, and then you get the whole like, oh, women love themselves just as much as trans people do. Again, the issue here is that the criticism, I don't think, is of trans people loving themselves. Like, this is just a common misunderstanding. The criticism is it's very much tied up with the central thing, which is what really matters, which is that trans identity is a claim about reality that has not sufficiently been evidenced. And as like within that context, as a criticism of the idea of trans identity, the only thing that really matters about autogynephilia is that it's not, oh, he got injured. The only thing that really matters about autogynephilia is it's not a sufficient basis for claiming that a biological male can be a woman.
Purity of femininity of trans women who date men, they call these people homosexual transsexuals, over the queer femininity of trans women who date women. So a pure or perverse dichotomy within the trans condition.
Any trans woman who is not exclusively attracted to men and who has not been very feminine from early childhood, which is kind of the stereotype. Any trans woman who's not like that is motivated by autogynephilia.
The book that...
Yeah, see, like, here's the thing, and this is kind of the other thing with, like, the autogynephilia malarkey, is that a lot of it's just based on the fact that it's a very simplistic dichotomy. And you know what? It is a simplistic dichotomy. That... To just say, like, there's only these kind of, like, hyper-feminine, homosexual trans people. I think that what's the phrase, like HSTS? Oh goodness me, homosexual, transsexual, and then there's autogynephiles and autogynephiles. That's me mispronouncing it, and that's it. Obviously, that's nonsense because, one of the primary issues with the trans thing is that it's such a meaningless concept. Please don't go in at the last minute. Thank God. It's such a meaningless concept that anybody could be trans. You know, there's all sorts, like, there isn't really any decent theorization you could do about it that should be compelling to most people. So, yeah, if you want to say, like, oh, this is a very simplistic conception of things, I would absolutely agree. But that's not really an argument against it. Hello, Jeremy. Heading to finals right now, so that's, like, for university or something? I guess? Finals? I assume you're not talking about my footballing career, because we are going to the FA Cup final, no doubt. But yeah, good luck with that.
Popularized the theory was written like a bad Wattpad story. The researchers actively drool over hot women in this book.
I start upstairs to get the panel.
Yeah, and look, I've already kind of addressed, this is like everything that's already covered in ContraPoints' autogynephilia video. I just don't really care about it. And I will say this, and I think this is something I've kind of said before, I don't like this argument of, oh, these guys spoke about HSTSs as if they were, like, attractive and as if they were attracted to them. And the thing with that is I actually think, honestly, in the interest of being honestly, that was a bit redundant. But yeah, we have to admit that sometimes just talking about whether certain groups are more or less attractive is worth stressing. Let me say it right now. There are some trans people, some trans women, so-called, who are more attractive than other trans women. And I think there are sociological implications to that. I'm not going to, and again, I don't want to really get into the question of who's hotter. I mean, you guys all know. You know who are the hot trans people. But there are all sorts of sociological implications for that, especially when you consider the fact that there's a reality that a lot of trans-identified males end up going into so-called sex work. Well, yeah, obviously recognizing, oh, how attractive these people. I've read an article before, like a proper academic article on straight men, supposedly, who are attracted to trans women, so-called. And again, the article kind of just had to get into the question of how attractive do men find these women. So I just want to say that, one, obviously I don't really care. Like, it's not a legitimate criticism to point out that some of the people who originally theorized the idea of this autogynephilia versus HSTS dichotomy were horny or whatever, because you don't have to be speaking that kind of language to confirm this point. But I also think it's worth noting that sometimes actually we should just allow for people to be honest about, like, and kind of open about sexuality in the interest of having like a proper actual worthwhile discussion.
Panoramic view, and I see Kim for the first time on the stairs, dancing, posing.
Oh. I accommodated this guy without even meaning to. I said, boss might make a request. Yeah, I really helped him out. I literally did it on the day. Awesome.
She is spectacular, exotic, and sexy. Her body is incredibly curvaceous, which is a clue that it...
And I also think the other thing I should say, because it's worth noting, there is no inconsistency, because I think something people act like is as if there is this hypocrisy in being critical of the trans thing. And by the way, other thing, just on top of all of this, there's so many levels of wrong here. Ray Blanchard, who originally theorized the whole trans thing, he didn't, he's not really gender critical. Like, actually, a lot of gender critical people have criticized Ray Blanchard for the fact that he is so pro trans. And they're like, oh, this guy's a little bit into the whole trans thing, isn't he? So, yeah, basically, I'm not about it. I don't think it's particularly convincing. And then I was going to say something else. Wait, what was it? So one, he's pro-trans. What was the other one? What was I going to say, guys? Help me out. I can't think. It's not going to come to me. Sexual trans. Oh no, yeah, sorry. The other thing was going to be, it's also worth noting, it isn't actually hypocritical for someone to be anti-trans, critical of the trans thing, while at the same time finding so-called trans women attractive. Because again, there's lots of ideas I disagree with, and that doesn't preclude the possibility of me finding the people who uphold those ideas attractive. No one would argue that it is insane that someone would be critical of Islam but find, Middle Eastern, your kind of typical women who are likely to be Muslim, find those type of women attractive. That's not really an argument. So actually, there will be no inconsistency in me saying, yeah, I find that trans identity is complete nonsense. But, you know what? Some of these trans people who believe in that, I think they're pretty all right looking. It's just not actually even a hypocrisy in the first place.
It may not be natural. And I notice a very subtle and not unattractive angularity of the face, which is also not clearly diagnostic on this tall siren. It is difficult to avoid viewing Kim from two perspectives, as a researcher, but also as a single heterosexual man.
Yeah, personally, I would not say this kind of stuff. But I say, as such, all power to those who just go for it. They're just like, yep, let me lay my cards on the table. This is where I'm at. It's like, you know what? Fair play to you.
Afterwards, my avowedly heterosexual male research assistant told me that he would gladly have had sex with her, even knowing Kim...
It's just bros being bros. Can I just say that? It's just a bunch of dudes being dudes. And can you really hate that?
Still possessed a penis.
And these people don't take.
Oh look, I've said this before. I've said this many times. I actually, to me, like I would actually find it a little bit weirder if there wasn't the penis there, because then I would know what happened to that penis, and I'd be like, oh no, I don't want to think about that operation. So that's kind of that's where I'm at personally. I'm like, honestly, if I had to have sex with a biological male, I think I would actually rather there was a penis there than have a mind towards by what means there came to not be a penis there. Oh, I thought I was going to get that.
Focus on cock and balls into account at all, or penis theory, or penis envy, or anything. And of course, it doesn't account for the rise in.
Well, penis envy, that's like a Freud thing, which is... and if anything, I feel like trans activists tend to prefer Freud... like, I think gender-critical people tend to be very much not into Freud. So, it's a bit weird to bring up penis envy.
Teenage girls. But that's why the theory also needs ROGD to work, to balance the deviant men with the pure, innocent girls. Ugh.
Again,
Seriously,
just to
that's
clarify, like it's this obsession with like this idea of there like needs to be a theory. You don't need like a grand theory for every single idea that you just don't think is true. Like actually, you can just say, "Oh yeah, I think there's this claim that people are making, and I just don't think this claim is actually correct." That's fine. You can say that. And again, like whatever political theories, if you don't think that free will exists, you don't need a grand theory of why people think it does, where you're like getting into the psychology and the sociology of everything. That was also a really nice shot. Like I kind of, I didn't want to get too distracted because whatever, we don't want to act too cool. We don't want to be like Dude Perfect, where like every single trick shot's the most incredible thing ever.
Nothing good or right about the story of autogynephilia, only that it fits into the narrative of the dichotomy of pure or perverse, of woman.
Again, this doesn't really make any sense because you're saying it fits into the narrative of the dichotomy of pure and perverse. But I mean, listen to what he just said.
Or man.
So that would be my...
Okay, so, but that's the thing. It doesn't fit into the dichotomy of woman or man because the autogynephilia dichotomy is between homosexual transsexuals and autogynephiles. That is the dichotomy. And in that dichotomy, both of those people are women who claim to be men. So, like, it's just not part of the dichotomy at all. And it's not a dichotomy between women and men. Certainly, gender-critical people aren't out here claiming that all autogynephiles are men and all HSTSs are women. Indeed, the homosexual thing there, when we're talking about people who are attracted to men, kind of very much gives away the fact that actually they're men. And of course, that's the other weird thing about this, which is a lot of the time, HSTSs will be more likely to just admit that they are men. Like a lot of the people who've kind of like, because there are some trans people who've reached out to me and said, oh, I do agree with you because I think there's like lots of aspects of the whole trans thing that are complete nonsense. And most of the time, those same people, it becomes pretty obvious, are basically homosexual. They are attracted to men. They want to kind of embody this typical, traditional, stereotypical feminine role of this like submissiveness and all that kind of, like basically set gay bottoms. That's it. In fact, I even saw like there was this one person who like actually said to me, oh, I'm pro-trans, but I actually agree with you about some of the criticisms you make, blah, 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 blah. And then I later saw, like, because I was like, oh, whatever, I can enjoy the fact that there are some trans people who follow, or, who appreciate me. I'll give this person a follow because they kind of messaged me on Twitter. And then like a little while later, I saw them and they basically said, why wouldn't, if you're a gay man, or sorry, if you're a gay bottom, they said, which is, I assume we all know our terminology. If you're a gay bottom, why wouldn't you just become a woman? At that point, like, what's the difference? So, again, that kind of communicates the sentiment that person had. But the point is, obviously, the fact that they agreed with me in some sense, now like, oh, you have some point, speaks to the fact that there are a lot of HSTSs who will be more willing to either give gender criticals some credence or indeed straight up admit, if we're being honest, I'm actually a man. Case in point, Blair White is, if anything, a HSTS. Like she is, that's for instance. But yeah, basically, Blair is attracted to men in a relationship with a man presents in a much more stereotypical, traditional feminine way. I don't think you could fairly say that Blair is an autogynephile. So yeah, the point is, none of this really makes sense in terms of being a dichotomy between men and women.
Evolutionary psychology explanation. We have heterosexuality and we have everything else, and among the everything else, we have those things that are not harmful and those things that are.
This is Ray Blanchard, the inventor of the theory of autogynephilia, but he's just a researcher. The one who popularized autogynephilia is Michael Bailey. It was his horny writings I showed you before. He did it through his book, The Man Who Would Be Queen.
Anybody who is sufficiently interested can Google The Man Who Would Be Queen.
And I want to give you another little excerpt, which I think will make all this rambling make a lot more sense. When Bailey wrote the book in 2003...
Sorry, I like all this rambling. Like, he hasn't really rambled at all. He's pretty, like, he's just been pretty direct about what he's saying. Like, you can, like, essentially this is just the same logic that would see anything called rambling. You've basically just shown someone explaining their position and their justification for that position and be like, yep, there they are, rambling. And I don't know, that just seems a bit dumb to me.
Transgender was still called transsexualism, and it was labeled as a mental disorder. And this is wrong. Not only is this whole video about trans people literally just being normal people, but we know for a fact it's wrong.
What do you mean by saying literally just being normal people? Because I, as a biological male, do not believe myself to be a woman. Again, it's kind of just, I don't know what you mean by just normal people. And by the way, it's also a bit weird because people with mental disorders are also just normal people. Like, it's a bit weird because I have an anxiety disorder, certainly. There's lots of people who have all sorts of different mental health issues nowadays. And so, yeah, it's kind of this weird thing of being like, it's almost like double wrong. Because on the one hand, saying like, oh, trans people, being trans isn't a mental disorder because trans people are just like normal people. A lot of people who have pretty unambiguous mental disorders should still be rightly understood as just like normal people, in that, you know, they're not like complete weirdos or freaks. They're just like regular people who you wouldn't think too much of if you just like met them on the street or whatever. But then the flip side to that is also trans people, if anything, are less like just normal regular people, and that they're much more likely to be constantly presenting their whole trans thing in every aspect of their life. Like, I have an anxiety disorder, I get panic attacks, but most people aren't aware of that. That's not like something that massively impacts my life. If I was, and therefore I can say, you know, I'm just like a normal person. Like, most people don't look at me and go, oh, there's Panic Attack McGee. But if I were trans, people, again, would be probably a fair bit more likely to know that. So, yeah, this seems like nonsense.
10 years later, in 2013, a new version of the Diagnostic Manual, kind of the Dictionary of Psychiatry, was released. With that, transsexualism was relabeled to transgender, and gender identity...
Okay, so again, this is just a appeal to authority. You know, trans medical science was terrible because they used to think that being trans was a mental disorder, and they were wrong when they thought that. But now the DSM-5 has been released, and they don't think it's a mental disorder. And obviously they're always right, so therefore it must now definitely not be a mental disorder. No, like, if you're going to say that they were wrong in the past, you can't now say the fact they've changed their mind is definitive, authoritative proof that the truth is now different, because you didn't think that they had the authority to determine the truth when you disagreed with them. So yeah, this is just not really an argument.
Disorder became gender dysphoria, and then it was no longer recognized as a mental disorder. In 2003, none of this had happened yet, of course, but in his book, Bailey described...
Okay, yeah, so literally the entirety of his argument for it's not a mental disorder was just, one, that they are just normal people like everyone else, which again, normal isn't really like it's not a very analytic word to be using, but insofar as, you know, I could just imagine what normal means. Lots of people who have mental disorders are pretty normal, more normal than I think your average trans person. So, yeah. And then, apart from that, just obviously that, oh, well, the DSM-5, they changed, so therefore it's no longer a mental disorder because, you know, now they say it's not. I think the argument that people actually... So I'm just going to do this guy a favor and make an argument for him. The only argument I've really seen for the claim that being trans is not a mental disorder is that they'll say, well, a mental disorder is something that causes someone issues in their life for which they need some sort of medical treatment. And the argument is, well, trans people don't need medical treatment, therefore it's not a mental disorder. Like, someone can be trans, which of course is funny because that means it's only therefore not become a mental disorder in that it is now being defined into meaninglessness. So yeah, but that's like the main argument I've heard, that essentially because trans identity is not something that actually demands these medical changes in and of itself, it's therefore not a mental disorder. But of course, you know, it whatever. Like, there's all sorts of issues there. I really don't think it's too much of a challenge to respond to that by saying, well, you know, that's not a massively helpful way to be defining terms. But even then, this guy didn't actually make that argument. That's just an argument he could have made.
And how some people, the anti-gender identity disorder folk, didn't think that being trans was a disorder. No, they argued being trans was not wrong. It was just society who had deemed it so, and society, not trans people, society was mistaken.
Oh yeah, so that's the other thing. Sorry, I missed that off. So basically, there are people who will say, well, the thing is, the reason why trans isn't a mental disorder is because it only does someone harm because of the attitude of society. And if society changed their attitude, then there wouldn't be any issues with being trans. Therefore, it's not a mental health issue. So yeah.
Bailey saw this as ideological grandstanding. He wrote,
Who can really hope to change society?
Bailey doesn't really believe that he holds the power to change society. Society, to him, is sort of...
Was that a foul? I'm really interested. Oh, offside. Okay, that was offside, to be fair. I just completely misjudged that.
calcified. What there is probably there for a reason, and that reason is probably a good one. How are we to know anyways? But I argue, Bailey, you are more wrong than you can possibly comprehend. Not only did the anti-gender identity disorder vote actually manage to change the definition, but so did Bailey. And as I've shown, the very field of sexology, what is deemed right and wrong, the history and evolution of understanding of trans people, the very words themselves have not only been changed, but have been invented during the past 200 years. We absolutely can change the course of history. We can change society. We can create a better world. Isn't that the point?
Sorry,
isn't the point?
Like, I don't know what you mean, but you're talking about we can create a better world. Literally, all you've been speaking about this entire time is just like all of these weird, like overly analytic terms to describe, like basically used by sexologists. If that's like what when you're like looking to, how can we imagine creating a better world? The first thing you're thinking about is like, well, let's look at how sexologists are defining terms. It's like, that's not really, in my view, as important of a thing as you seem to think it is. That's not to me like the standout, yes, we did it. We made the world a better place because now sexologists are using different language. I don't know, that's not as convincing to me as some big victory as it seems to be for you. Right.
To change society. But within those words, who can really hope to change society lies also an admission. Bailey hasn't thought about changing it. Why should he? He's perfectly content. It's nice when things make sense. It's nice when they're opposite neat categories. But it's wrong. Every point I go through shows it to be wrong. There's no scientific argument that shows that trans...
Let's just bear in mind, there has not really been a single argument from this guy at all. Like, nothing he's actually said has functioned to change anyone's mind about anything. And again, I don't even care about this. Like, none of this really matters. Like, even if he was right about every single criticism he has of these sexologists, it still wouldn't prove a biological male can be a woman. So he could literally be right about all this. And I have no reason to want to defend any of this, but he is just wrong. Hello, Blake. Isn't most interpretation of trans ideology technically unfalsifiable, since they argue male/female are distinct from man/woman, despite them still finding it offensive to call it a male? Yeah, I would say, I mean, yeah, it's unfalsifiable because they're not really defining terms, so it means the claims they're making don't really have any substance.
People do not exist, and that is no moral argument either. Only a reliance on a system of good and evil with roots in religious fundamentalism and...
No, what are you talking about? Like, nobody's like mentioned like good and evil here. And again, like it's just a bit weird that you're talking about the guys who are like, oh, I tell you who's really hot, a bunch of like gay men who like to dress as women and presumably get buggered up the arse. And yeah, you know what? They're pretty awesome. They're great. But I just don't like these autogynephiles. I would say that the people who are saying like that gay men dressing up as women and getting banged by dudes, I'd say the people saying that they're like the more reasonable ones are probably not super into oppressive religious stuff. That's just kind of like that's sort of like it doesn't really pick up or let's say communicate a religious repression vibe to me, being like yeah, just obsessing over the sexy homosexuals. It doesn't really, you get what I'm saying? Maybe someone's going to disagree here, but I just feel like, to me, I'm not aware of that as a enduring religious theme, except for maybe insofar as many religions do have a bit of religious hypocrisy in some aspects of their leadership. So, maybe there have been some religious people who had privately thought, oh, I'm secretly into the gays, but I don't think you can say that's, oh, the referee took the ball. Yeah, I don't think it can be said that is really fundamental to religious tenets. Oh, I'm just now seeing that my typo showed up despite me deleting it, damn it. I actually, wait, what was your... Oh, is it just that your typo was that you said isn't instead of aren't? Yeah, whatever. I don't mind about that. We don't have grammar here. Let's watch while we check out these. I keep scoring really early and then not scoring after that. But I think it's just because I realize I can ease off.
Vulgar, really vulgar racism. A system of pure or perverse, of pathological or natural.
Wait, vulgar racism. Is he literally just saying because we have split people into different groups, therefore it's racist because racists split people into groups? Because that's not really a good argument.
All things we ascribe meaning to, all things we created, all things we can change.
Oh. We really haven't had very many adverts, have we? I almost forgot adverts were a thing. I almost forgot we lived in this capitalist hellscape.
What ties to people like Anna Hutchinson and Hannah Barnes and Melissa Mitchin and Kirsty Entwistle, Helen Joyce, Jennifer Blake, Peter Bogo.
Oh, what's happening here? Why is there like... Is the transfer window still open? I don't really have any need to look at the transfer window, whatever, anyway. I forgot they had this like grand conspiracy thing. Oh, I wrote falsifiable instead of unfalsifiable LMAO. Oh, you know what? I didn't even... Okay, I see. Yes, sorry. Yes, I see.
Ocean, Lisa Littman, Ray Blanchard, and Michael Bailey together is transphobia. But let me turn it on its head. Transphobia is just a symptom of a sickness, a belief in man-made systems held up by time and society, an unwillingness to accept that not only are they wrong about trans people.
Okay, let's see what the press conference is. The media have gathered in the press room. Please let me know if you wish to attend the press conference. I'll attend the press conference. Let's see. So I need to make a comment on... let's make a comment on one of my players and say they're really good. So I'm going to say that... Wait a minute. Oh, yeah, let's say... I think I really like Tutonda. Maybe that seems weird, but I... Wait, hold on. Who's on good form? Okay, I should compliment someone who's on good form. Let's compliment Zubar. We'll praise him. There we go, that's what I did. I'm saying, yep, he's a good job. Good old Zubar.
They are wrong about the world, because there is no good and evil. The world is only what we make it. Of course it doesn't matter to them if I...
Whoa, there is no good and evil. The world is only what we make it. I mean, I don't want to unpack that. At the end of the day, I mean, we can get into like meta ethics and all that kind of stuff. And then it's almost like there's meta ethics and then there's almost like meta ethics, because if you want to say that there is no such thing as objective good and evil, that's one thing. If you want to say that good and evil don't exist at all, and as such we cannot make any moral judgments, well, that's a bit more of an issue. Like, you seem to be arguing that we cannot talk about good and evil as legitimate categorizations. And that's a problem, because I would say, especially considering you're talking about, like, at least to some extent, sexuality, I'd say there's a lot there that could be falling under the category of evil. So just a weird comment, but again, kind of really outside of what we need to be talking about when it comes to trans identity. Like, yes, if you are going to be a full-on postmodernist and say that nothing exists, nothing matters, everything's ultimately relative and subjective, then okay, fine. Based on that, you can be pro-trans. But the problem is, at that point, you're conceding a lot more, because most people do not want to embrace postmodernism because they recognize it is, in fact, nonsense and probably responsible for a lot of what's bad happening in society right now. What is this? Wait a minute. Oh, that's funny. Sorry, it's I bit into an orange pip earlier today, and whatever.
I debunk every single claim made about trans people, because their belief is not rooted in science or truth or even reality. They think that any child who grows up to be trans is someone they couldn't save. And when it comes to saving children, anything goes.
Chapter 8.
In olden days, a glimpse of stalking was looked on as something shocking, but now, God knows, anything goes. You know what, actually, I want to change our thingy, because I think last time, I'm not saying this is the entire reason I lost, but I noticed that the referee had the same coloured outfit as me, so I'm going to make it so they're playing with the referee having the same coloured outfit as them, so I don't keep trying to pass the referee.
Puberty blockers. In
Puberty
2019,
blockers, okay, cool, we're going to look at puberty blockers, fine, whatever, let's just say this out the gate. Lupron was approved for use, but that's because it was approved as use to treat cancer, meaning that obviously the bar for something being approved when it exists to cure a deadly disease is obviously going to be lower than the standard it would need to pass to... Okay, well, lost there. It's going to be lower than the standard it would need to pass in order to just, treat someone, or, quote-unquote treat someone who doesn't have a actual legitimate physical issue at all, right? Because obviously if you've got cancer, well, you better hope that you can get something to help treat your cancer, but you're not going to care as much about whether you're not going to care about the side effects if the end result is that you get your cancer cured, whereas you should be caring a lot about the side effects if you are just getting puberty blockers. Like, for example, I've got a bit of a cold right now. There are certain, chemotherapy has all sorts of side effects, but people accept chemotherapy because it's curing something much more dangerous. But I would not take a drug to cure my cold that will give me the side effects that chemotherapy has. And in the exact same sense, Lupron was originally approved to cure to help treat cancer. And in that case, we're not even talking about a cold, we're talking about something that's completely made up in someone's head, which is this whole, gender dysphoria thing.
A legal complaint was filed against the Tavistock Clinic to protect vulnerable children from radical experimental medical treatment. A case to protect them from puberty blockers.
This is where we meet Susan Evans. She was another one of those, experts from time to think. You see, Susan Evans worked as a nurse from the Tavistock for 4 years, from 2003 to 2007. Surely that must have been very, very hard for her. In 2019, 12 years after she quit...
I don't know what you mean by, that must have been very, very hard for her. People in general, have jobs that they do, that they're working at. I guess, the implication... I don't know, I guess what he's trying to say, because I'm going to assume this woman is, critical of the trans thing, and he's saying, it must have been very hard for her to do things that she actually felt were unnecessary, and she kind of had to be a whistleblower for that stuff. And it's well, yeah, if someone's been part of what they perceive to be a medical scandal, that probably was hard for them. And I don't know why you're making fun of that. I know, it's talking about Edward Snowden being Edward Snowden worked at the CIA. That must have been very hard for him. It's yeah, probably, because he saw the kind of stuff that the CIA is doing and realized that they're evil. And that probably did cause him, that probably would be very hard. I wouldn't want to work for an organization that I would then realize, for the sake of my conscience, I have to call out as having done lots of bad stuff.
Her job at Tavistock, Susan Evans sets up a fundraiser to essentially force the Tavistock clinic to stop whatever they were up to. She wanted them to stop administering puberty blockers.
Evans initiated judicial review proceedings against JIDS, arguing under 18s cannot give informed consent to puberty blockers when not enough is known about what they do.
And this came to be one of the most important legal cases against trans healthcare. Susan features an anonymous mother, Mrs. A, to help her fundraiser. Mrs. A represented a group of parents, but she specifically had concerns about her autistic daughter, who was referred to the Tavistock.
We want the best for our children, but we need this to be from a position of evidence-based, not experimental medicine. Please support me in this case to prevent further harm being caused from this unproven experimental treatment.
It seems that's also what Susan Evans wants. A treatment based on evidence. I mean, she links to Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine on her website. And that seems fair? Now, even though it took Susan more than a decade to finally stand up to what she frames like child torture, I don't think it was just because she has a pure...
Oh, again, this really like crappy thing to do. By the way, that's literally like an argument people kind of make to like delegitimize the survivors of assault. What you're saying there is, oh, it took her so long to stand up to what she deems to be torture, therefore it must be insincere. That's like genuinely like a really scummy argument. And that was literally, like that's clearly what he was implying there. Like, oh, she worked at this organization for a long time, and now she thinks it's child torture. But if she really thought that, she would have stopped being part of this organization right away. So clearly she's being disingenuous. Clearly she's lying. Yeah, obviously that's like a really gross kind of notion to perpetuate, or like standard to perpetuate, that unless you immediately call out an organization that's doing something horrible, if you show any kind of agreement with it for any period of time, that must mean that you don't really have a problem with it. Yeah, gross. Shut up, you horrible man.
Whoa, patient heart. For one, Susan has a husband named Marcus Evans.
I'm Marcus Evans. I'm a psychoanalyst. I worked in the NHS for 40 years. Originally, I trained as a psychiatric nurse. And then for the last 20 years in the health service, I was head of the nursing discipline at the Tavistock Clinic. I then went on to become the governor, which is a voluntary position on the board of governors of the Tavistock Clinic.
Marcus Evans is a psychoanalyst and worked with the Tavistock both before and after Susan quit. So Marcus continued a close relationship with child experimenters for a decade. Then in 2019...
You're such a dickhead. Oh my goodness, like what are you doing? This is literally like... This is like the argument that like the CIA would put out after like someone's revealed that they've been like torturing people, or like, you know, they've been like doing experiments on children and stuff, which is, I think, something that the CIA has actually done. Yeah, and then like the, you know, the evil CIA guy would come out and be like, well, you say we did MK Ultra, but isn't it suspicious that you were part of an organization that was doing all of these experiments on people? Doesn't that make you a bad person? And can we really trust someone who does? It kind of reminds me of the, Mayor Quimby even released Sideshow Bob, a twice convicted attempted murderer, from prison. Paid for by Sideshow Bob for mayor. Like, it's kind of like that thing of like, you're like attacking someone for having been tolerant of your evil. It's just, yeah, that's like really... That's really bad. I don't know. Like, it's just because it annoys me because I just know this exact type of argument is in fact used by the most insidious, manipulative people in the world. Like, it's literally the primary argument used by abusers.
Marcus was appointed to the position of governor at the Tavistock, and 3 months later, he quit. He says that he quit because of concerns from a mother who represented a group of parents.
Oh,
where have I heard that one before? And a report on the gender clinic from David Bell, another governor. David Bell's report questions whether the clinic should do more to consider young people's personal histories, notably by examining whether they are on the autistic spectrum, have experienced trauma, or are being influenced by social.
I'm wondering whether we're going to get the clip, which is basically, literally, the clip is of a child who was interviewed who said that this child felt, that their parents wanted the gender clinic stuff more than they did. And this was a child who was same-sex attracted. So the same-sex attracted child was like, and obviously there were lots of nurses at Tavistock who literally said that they had examples of parents coming in where one of the parents was not accepting of homosexuality. There's a quote that was like, "Oh, I'm so glad my child isn't gay." So yeah, like maybe I'll have to find these quotes. Maybe I'll find them so we can start them next time we jump back into this. But I'm gonna guess he's not gonna show this, even though these quotes obviously completely destroy what this guy's talking about. Hello. Oh, by the way, hello Threnmore, and hello Tramp the Rabbit.
Pressures before helping them on the path to transition. David Bell, of course, has never worked with trans children.
We shouldn't use the term transgender or transgenderism when it comes to young people, because by doing so, you behaving as if you know what you're talking about, as if there is an object called transgender which is a diagnosis. It's not a diagnosis, it's a symptom.
Would it surprise you if I said that David Bell was also one of those experts from Barnes' book? They all repeat the same fucking talking points. But anyways, back to...
Again, just because people repeat the same talking point doesn't mean those talking points are incorrect.
The fundraiser and legal case. Now, since Mrs. A or her child never actually stepped foot in Tavistock, Susan needed someone with more oomph. And with almost £100,000 raised from the crowdfunding effort, it allowed Susan Evans to hire a team of lawyers and get in contact with someone who was willing to put a face to the legal claim.
I should have been given intensive therapy, basically, to investigate the feelings that I was having, to try and, figure out how I got to that stage.
8 years on, she wants to transition back to being a woman and is suing the NHS.
Her lawyers will argue children cannot give informed consent
to
treatment.
This is Kira Bell, whatever. I don't even know if I looked into this issue specifically at the time, so if specific stuff was said, I might not be able to contradict it, but I think the good news is we've probably shown enough of this guy's general character and dishonesty that it can be taken for granted he's probably misrepresenting stuff, but we'll see.
Delaying puberty or helping them to transition.
Kira Bell is what's called a detransitioner or retransitioner. You see, Kira was born a girl, but even in early childhood, she was one of the boys. Then puberty hit. She developed hips and breasts, which she hated. She lost her male friends. Kira became depressed, isolated, and suicidal. She hated that she was turning into a woman. Belle wanted to be a boy, a man, and then she was presented with that possibility. Kira kept insisting that she wanted to be a boy, so when she was 15, her psychologist referred her to the Tavistock. And Kira Bell kept being adamant. She was a boy. A year later, at the age of 16, she was administered puberty blockers. A year after that, she was put on gender-affirming hormones. 5 years after her initial referral, Bell had her breast removed. But Kira wasn't Kira any longer. In her place stood Quincy. And
Quincy?
Then she detransitioned.
Quincy? I did not know this. Imagine choosing the name Quincy. I was thinking surely Kieran. It is interesting to be when the trans people don't just, and obviously Kira was not trans, whatever. But it is interesting when people who transition don't just pick the obvious name that would be, the equivalent to their regular name. I mean, I'm not saying they have to. It's just kind of funny to me. It's like Kieran's right there. And you go for Quincy? Quincy. It's fine. You can be Quincy.
The further my transition went, the more I realized that I wasn't a man and never would be.
Okay, any speculation would be really really dumb of me. I do think maybe she should have used different before detransition, after detransition picture in her article. Maybe.
What makes me
Wait,
a man?
I didn't get to see what that picture was. I don't really think this matters, but whatever. Like, I don't know. It just, I feel like maybe I have to check in a moment. So I'm just gonna. Okay, wait. Oh, okay. But no. Okay. Yep. Okay. No. Okay. No. Okay. I was gonna wait for the ball to go out. In fact, actually, while I'm at it, I do need to do a substitution. Okay, I'm gonna look at the picture because I need to know what's happening. Like, what's this great argument against? Like, oh, look, they had a bad detransition picture. What could this possibly be? What could be this terrible detransition picture? Let's bring on Straker. It feels weird to replace my. I don't like that my captain is. Oh wait. Okay. So I can do this. Lovely. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's have a look. What's wrong? Wait, what? Wait, what?
Transition picture in her article. Be really, really dumb of me. I do think maybe she should have used different before detransition, after detransition picture in her article.
Oh, so is wait. Pre-retransition, post-retransition. What do you mean? I'm so confused. What are you saying? Why use different? What do you? Am I missing something? What is the argument supposed to be here? It's just like there's one photo. Is like the argument that Kira Bell looks too much, like looks too masculine in the second photo? Because, and also, by the way, I don't know why this guy's using the phrase retransition instead of detransition. I think he's like, it's almost like he's using this to imply that people, like that basically you are transitioning. It almost implies that your biological sex is something you can transition to rather than just being something you're born with. And I think that's very stupid. Whatever. Okay. I don't know. I don't care. This seems like a really stupid thing to be saying. I can't possibly conceive what the argument would be.
Maybe.
What makes me a man?
Oh.
I remembered my idea as a 14-year-old that hormones and surgery would turn me into someone who appeared to be a man. Now,
Hi, have you considered playing The Sims during your streams? It would be a funny choice while not being too demanding. Yes, so I could. The issue is that I have the ability to connect my PlayStation 3 to stuff, but this laptop is not as good as it should be, so I basically can't really play any PC games on while streaming. Or I could maybe, but I have very little confidence that it wouldn't be placing an incredible demand on my laptop. So the reason why I am streaming only stuff I can play on my PlayStation. I think I actually do have some fun ideas for like The Sims, and I would like to play The Sims at some point. But yeah, I think I've kind of committed to this now. Remark about the picture looks like another well poisoning. There should be a poisoning counter. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. That I think, I don't know. I mean, like I say, my plan is to kind of edit this into a massive I don't know what the word is, like a marathon video for my main channel. And of course, when I do that, maybe I could do that. I don't know. But I mean, whatever. One example of poisoning the well is too many. But yeah, it is crazy how often this guy does this. Also, Juv, sorry, says, this guy left his job for this video for one book. I don't know what I mean by one book. But I also didn't realize. So he probably did mention this, and I've just forgotten. So I assume you're saying the guy I'm responding to quit his job to make this video, and if so, yeah, I think that's very silly because it's not a great video. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this guy does have... The thing is, I don't know. Like, at the end of the day, people can build a YouTube career off a lot. Having said that, it's also true that nowadays, and I think this is actually kind of sad, you cannot really build a YouTube career off just one viral video. You can have a video do really well, and then the next video you make, no one gets recommended it. Because that's what YouTube's like now. YouTube's not really about, like, channels. It's about content. And yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of how YouTube is right now.
I was that person, but I recognized that I was very physically different from men. Living as a trans man helped me acknowledge that I was still a woman.
Alright, I'm not saying Kira Bell is lying.
Oh my goodness me. It's like this guy's shtick. Okay. It's just like it's not an argument. You can't just like kind of stammer and like laugh. But okay, let's hear. What's your like? How are you gonna? Because obviously he's gonna try and imply that she's lying. So what's he gonna say? Oh God, no. Okay, that was offside.
If you listen closely, Bell never...
They're really strict with the offside in this.
Outright says that she doesn't want to be a man, just that she never thinks she never could be or would be a man. She never says she regrets her initial transition. And I accept her as a woman, just like I would accept her as a man. So if she ever... Bell was the perfect face to oppose puberty blockers.
Oh my goodness. Okay, like whatever. So that's a bit weird. Like, I don't care. Basically, I mean, I kind of get the logic of what he's saying, that because she didn't say that she, like, basically she said that she couldn't be, not she didn't want, whatever. But, yeah, it's just a bit weird. Like, you don't need to, it's just kind of unnecessary. And at the end of the day, the problem is that actually, I would say most people, when they realize that they can't be the sex that they want to be, they would, like, nothing's going to change their mind, because they're going to realize that all of this trans stuff is just fancy thinking. Oh man, am I going to draw?
As soon as Kira Bell joined the legal case, she got in touch with some very powerful people who were eager to help her.
It's very interesting because I'm going to talk a lot about science and medicine and best medical practice, you know, academic topics, but I'm required by my university to make this disclaimer that I'm disavowing my affiliation with my university because of the politics involved here.
One of those powerful people was Paul Cruz, who served as expert witness. He's closely affiliated with Alliance Defending Freedom and other far-right organizations who have worked to undermine same-sex marriage and try to enforce sterilization as a
Alliance, I feel like they're probably not far-right. Yeah, that was massively offside.
Requirement for transitioning. When Cruz was told how limiting access to gender-affirming care might result in more children dying to suicide, Cruz simply answered,
"Some children are born in this world to suffer and die."
Paul, of course, isn't an expert. Paul has never treated anyone, child or adult, for gender dysphoria. His own university denounced him, stating,
"He is not a psychiatrist, a psychologist, nor a mental health care provider of any kind who could speak knowledgeably of transgender health."
He still did wonders in the trial. Another person Bell got in contact with was Stephanie Davis-Arai.
Kira Bell sat next to Stephanie Davis-Arai, who was an intervener in the case.
I'm annoyed at the fact that I'm about to draw and I want to win. Oh shit, I just gave it up. I've yet to win a football league match, and that's really annoying me. I've lost and I've drawn. Let's see. How's the They didn't have a single shot. To be fair, I only had 2 shots on target, but I don't know. That's annoying. That's irking me to my core. So where are we in the league? We have to start winning. There's just no way around it. We have to actually start winning, because otherwise we're just not going to be able to achieve anything. All right. So the video is about to end. I'm just gonna check where we're at. Hello, William Jenkins. Let's see. So sarcastically saying their points, saying they're wrong and evil without any other context, uses random nonsense logic. Yep, sounds like a standard pro-trans video. Yeah. It's fun. Season. Let's go. Tables. I like how it shows me every single... Okay, whatever. The Emirates FA Cup. The Emirates FA Cup. Okay. Capital One Cup. Show me the... Where is... Oh, Football League 2. There we go. Why is it showing me the South America Cup? I don't understand. Okay. So. Okay, we're in the... Oh, wait. We're not in the top half. Where are we? So. We're 15. Okay. Whatever. We're on 1 point. But nobody's on... Okay, well, a lot of people haven't even played their second match. Never mind then. Wait, no. Okay, wait. Oh. This is saying we've only played one match. Did I not save this last time or something? Because I was thinking, I swear we'd played Exeter City last time. Did it not save properly? Because if it didn't, I'm going to be really annoyed. But it must have. Oh, whatever. I'm going to save now. Alright. Also, is there no game audio because it would be hard to listen when trying to listen to the video? No, actually, the real reason is because I can't get the game audio to work. And the thing is, I have got it to work in the past. So something just in particular has gone wrong this time, because ordinarily it does work. And every single time that I've started streaming, I've always been leaving it very late already. So I just haven't had time to fix it. But yes. So yeah, basically, in theory, I could include some audio. There is like another issue, which is that because the audio actually plays through my computer, it basically creates a bit of an echo. So I don't know. That's like another thing. But I don't know if it would make a difference if the audio was kind of quiet, whatever. Anyway, I'm going to go now, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all later. I'm a bit behind with the videos I'm supposed to be uploading this week, so